tonight, don't need to download anything. Just go to slow.com, ask the questions there. This is where we're going for the questions. You guys get to pick which one's the best. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Best ones go to the top. Easy. And I will skip over them if they're stupid. Really?
And I'll skip over them if they're hard.
Okay. So very informal tonight. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me, and let me begin as I usually always do, by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land of which we meet and pay my respects to elders both past and present.
So give me a little bit of background. What was Mr Dalidakis doing as a child? Was there? I always ask the question of whether there was a father or a mother who was an entrepreneur.
Well, I think...
These are not going to be the usual questions you get.
No, this is... I feel like I'm on... this is your life, actually. I'm waiting to see, if this is the Channel 9 camera and we're rebooting the series. No, look, just a traditional childhood. Myself, my sister, mum and dad, a couple of dogs, because one ran onto North Road and got hit by a car, so we got a second one. That was a good lesson.
It's not funny. Why is that funny?
Well, because people understand the pain that you go through as a child when you lose an animal that you love. I think for me, I grew up, and I was just talking with some Singaporeans the other day. We had some visitors from there, and I talked about how my first computer came from Singapore because Dad at the time worked for a multinational and spent almost 3 weeks of the month in Singapore running their operations there. And so one day he came home with an Apple clone, and I was actually musing. I know this is on record, so you can edit this out later, but I was musing at how, given how my luggage gets knocked about and it's only got a few shirts and jackets in it, how Dad actually was able to bring a computer home from Singapore and it made it home safely. So,
I don't want to know.
But the reason that I was talking about that actually was because when you look at the power in just your mobile phone alone, and there, thank you for that cue. When you look at the power that's in your mobile phone, the computing capacity, the speed, and the memory, it just blows my mind as to where we've come and where we're probably going to end up.
So, what was moving forward a little bit? What was your education?
So, went to a public primary school. My mum was a primary school teacher her whole career, and went to the local one. Went to St Michael's Grammar for my secondary schooling, which has been in the media for all the wrong reasons recently, including a lack of a respected gender by some of their young men in Year 11, which is disappointing. And then went on to university, did a double degree, Bachelor of Arts in Business, a Bachelor of Arts in Politics and Thai Language, and a Bachelor of Business in Management.
And where did the I guess want to helping people start and your journey through politics?
Well, I mean, how long do we have? I'm a first generation Australian, and if you've heard this story before, I apologise, but really it goes back to my grandmother, my mother's mum. My mum's family were refugees from Nazi Germany, and my mum was actually born in Shanghai, which was the only port that was open to Jewish refugees fleeing from Europe. And when my grandfather was taken by the Nazis, he was taken back in 1935, well before they actually started their collective policies of collecting Jews and putting them into both internment camps and then death camps afterwards. And they took him 8 days after they got married. My grandmother had never worked in her life before, and for 3.5 years she then had to work to support herself. And at the end of that period of time, she was able to get my grandfather out of the camps, and she arranged passage for her two brothers, her parents and my grandfather, to Shanghai. But for me, as amazing as that story is on its own, when they came out here, they were able to come out here because my grandmother had a cousin living in Gippsland that saw them on a Red Cross refugee list, and you could only come to Australia at the time if you were sponsored by a family member. But she had friends of hers that were left back in Shanghai, and so she caught a bus and went to Canberra, and she caught up with the then Immigration Minister, a guy by the name of Arthur Call, that many of you would know, and she demanded a meeting with him, and she got it. And then she demanded a special visa for this family in Shanghai who had no family here and no family in the United States. So they were basically going to be left in Shanghai. And Arthur Corwell granted them that visa. And they settled, sadly, in Sydney. But to this day, 4 generations of that family are alive and well. And I think that from a young age, the idea that there's something a little bit more important than just yourself and helping other people that are in less fortunate positions than you are is something that I grew very strongly to.
Cool. I couldn't ask for a better story. Could have been, I don't know, boring. But it was great. It was great. It was heavy. It was heavy. But the startup thing. I'm gonna.
Actually, just before you do,
because
because it's not just your chat; it's mine too.
Oh yeah.
I do note that we've probably started a little bit later, so I want you all to know that I don't plan to leave until you've all had an opportunity to either ask a question of me on camera, on film, or when we break at the end. I've got 3 young children who should hopefully be in bed within the hour. So whether I finish on time or not, they're going to be in bed by the time I get home. So I won't leave because I don't want to sell any of you short for coming, and I thank you for turning up.
Thank you. That's cool. Actually, his assistant said, look, we're not going to take any stupid questions, so I'm going to take care of it. I'll make sure Andy's taking.
Well, you're taking
listen to Andy. No, listen to Andy.
But you're taking the stupid questions anyway.
That's true. That's my job. So, look, great story there. You were passionate about helping people. Where did the love of technology come? And that's, basically you got a room full of startups and entrepreneurs here. So I want to just kind of pivot a little bit here, use a startup term, into the technology stuff.
Well, pivot's also not just a startup term. It's a term about international security and foreign relations and
Basketball.
the US. Well, the US pivot into Asia, but we're here about tech and startups. So, look, I've loved my first, experience was I go back to that Apple clone back in the mid '80s, and the power that computing presented to itself at that time as a young kid. Obviously, gaming for me was where it was at, and of course, growing up through university days, exams and assignments, and then into my work. Obviously, I needed it as a tool, and so when we look forward to today, the pivot, to use your term for me, was when I had the opportunity to go and work in Canberra. So I'd been the chief executive of an industry association down here for about 3.5 years, and Stephen Conroy, who was the then comms minister, had come to me and asked me to go and work for him in relation to the NBN rollout. And I'd always said no, and then after the 2010 election, I then said okay. And so the opportunity to work on a project that was a $37 billion infrastructure project that had the opportunity back then to be nation-changing was for me an amazing opportunity. So my love of what tech can do as an enabler, what it can do as a disruptor, and what it can do as a leveller. And what I mean by that is that what we were rolling out in the original scope was a ubiquitous network that meant that 93% of Australia's population would have access to really gigabit speeds. Now, everyone in this room is pretty much technically competent, so I can talk about this comfortably, but it was never the download speeds as everyone knows, it's always the upload speeds. And so the problem, of course, with the MTM or the multi-technology mixes rolled out by the current Liberal government is that it's the upload speed that is seriously disadvantaged with a fibre to the node rollout or using the mix of technologies, because of course part of that mix is to use the existing HFC network, and that also has significant constraints. So for me, to be able to work on the NBN was something that really excited me about the opportunities. We saw huge opportunity both in small business, education, within health service delivery, about what that meant. And of course, now that I'm in government, governments really have 2 levers at their disposal. We can either increase revenue or we can obviously cut our expenditure. And so what the NBN actually had the opportunity to do was allow us to do more for less. So yes, we were cutting our expenditure potentially down the track, but what it meant was that we were actually getting more benefits out of it. So if you want me to curl up in the fetal position and suck my thumb, just keep asking me questions about the NBN today, and I will.
But the member for Wentworth invented the internet.
Hang on. Slack. Slow here.
Thanks, Dad. But look, in all seriousness, I think it's a massive missed opportunity for us because, you know, when we talk about pressures on infrastructure in society today, the opportunity to actually decentralise both government services, population growth, and also opportunities for business to grow, that was, for me, a game changer that we've now passed up.
I was in a round table this morning with the guys at Dropbox. One of the questions was, why does Australia need to be innovative? I simplified it by saying, we're going to run out of shit to dig out of the ground. Why is tech so important to Australia?
Well, not just tech, but you know, you've actually come to the essence of what it means to be a Victorian. Because, you know, we don't have the iconic beauty of Sydney. I mean, Sydney's a beautiful city. It's like medication; it's good in small doses, but you know, but nonetheless, it is beautiful. And we don't have a backyard in Victoria full of resources today. We did that back in the 1800s with gold, of course. So we've always had to be smarter, more inventive about how we do things. And so I think that's why you've seen Victoria develop very differently from other states. And of course, let's not forget that Victoria was one of the few mainland states that people actually came to live here because they wanted to. And it does make a difference when you consider the psyche and where we're at. And I think that the inclusiveness about multiculturalism here in Victoria, the ability to celebrate one's differences, not be fearful of them, is something that actually benefits our ecosystem within the tech community as well.
Can I ask, so I've seen, you know, we've been doing Startup Grind 4 years September. Even in those years, there's just been such leaps and bounds. Why are, you know, people always say Silicon Valley, I guess, is, you know, Mecca or whatever, but we're definitely creating our own unique ecosystem here, and we're doing a great job of it.
Yeah, so the first thing I always say to people is we're not trying to be Silicon Valley. We can't be. It's unique. And it developed because of the intersection between effectively the US Department of Defence and Stanford. And, you know, we don't have that kind of spend, but what we do have are other traits. And so, for example, that inclusiveness that I was talking, for me, that's a real differential. It's a real competitive advantage for Melbourne. So we've met with, me personally, but also the government has met with a lot of companies that have come out from San Fran or the Valley, and set up in their Asia Pac headquarters here in Melbourne. And one of the reasons that they tell me that they've chosen Melbourne is because they find Melbourne so similar culturally to San Francisco. And I think that's a great attribute to have. And so from my perspective, what we're wanting to do is actually build on that. And so we've seen companies like Slack and Square and Zendesk that you mentioned before, GoPro, Stripe, Etsy, Eventbrite, and Eventbrite, yes, Deliveroo, but all set up here when they're looking to enter the Australian, if not the Asia Pacific region. And so when you add that to the existing ecosystem, 99 Designs again, which you mentioned, and then you've got REA, Car Sales, Seek, Kogan, you've got Culture Amp, Catapult. You know, Catapult's an amazing company in its own right with what they're doing within the sporting community globally, a leader globally in their field. And then, of course, you also have technology companies that are trying to find their way, like Nitro PDF, that started out in Melbourne, had to go to San Francisco to access both VC and also engineering capacity, have found themselves in Dublin, but, you know, one day I hope that they look to reinvest here in Melbourne. And my job now is to not stop a company from going overseas, because I actually think my job's to help them. If that's what they feel they need to do and that's where they want to be, my job's to see them be as successful as they can be, not to stop them from living their dream. What I'm trying to do is build an ecosystem that says to somebody, if you want to stay, you can. And if you want to come back like Culture Amp, for example, then we've got the resources, we've got the size, we've got the scale, but we've also got the people that will allow you to as well.
We're talking about Deliveroo, Zendesk, Slack, all these guys. In my mind, and pretty much how I pitched it to these guys when you come in here, it seems like there's too many coincidences to have so many good companies coming to Melbourne. In my mind, I think that you must be pitching these guys a little bit to pick Melbourne, right?
Yeah, well, we work hard. Excuse me, we were talking about what we do because of not having stuff to dig up, to paraphrase you.
Yeah.
And, Victoria, and this is where my portfolio spread of innovation and small business and trade actually works in nicely, because Victoria has currently 18 trade and investment offices globally. We have the second largest number of trade and investment offices behind Austrade of any jurisdiction in the country, and we're expanding that to 20 by the end of this year. 19 will be Singapore, which opens any day now, and number 20 will be in Santiago, Chile. And so when you talk about what we're doing in pitching, the reason I mention those trade investment offices is because our North American headquarters is in San Francisco. They do a tremendous job. I'm not going to ask people if you've met with our team in San Fran, but they are a tremendous asset for us. They pitch hard, they work hard, and also what we do is those companies that we mentioned that came and set up here, they then become vocal advocates for us back in the Valley or San Fran itself. And so whenever we're looking to a new company that is looking to make that jump into Melbourne or Australia, we use them to openly advocate for us, and it's working. But it's working not because of me, it's working because of everybody in this room. I couldn't do it without the people that live and work in Melbourne in our industry. It's because of what they've done, what they've built well before I've come, and will be here well long after I've gone, that is actually helping us. Give yourselves a clap.
Yeah, that's good.
There you go.
With the so we're attracting the best talent here. Our ecosystem is thriving. I think we're in the top 10 in the world, something like that at the moment. You got people standing at this event, right? It's a testament to what's happening around.
To your questions.
It's true. If you didn't have the host with the most, I don't know what would happen. But you saw a need that goes, all right, we need to put some money aside. Can I talk about the $60 million fund and
Of course you can.
What problem you're trying to solve there, and what are the kind of things you're looking for to?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we decided in opposition in the lead up to the 2014 election, what could we do to try and effectively turbocharge the industry or the sector? And what we decided then, and I maintain it was the right decision, was to look at supporting incubators, accelerators and co-location spaces. So we put together this policy of $60 million to predominantly fund those three areas. There will be other things that they do, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But that's where the majority of the funds will go. So if we fast forward to today, we're very close to making an announcement about the first round of successful grant recipients in that fund. And that's a very exciting time for me, because it's a bit like when my wife and I got married. I remember Dad saying to me at the time that today should be your happiest day till now, but it should not be the best day of your marriage going forward. And so again, announcing the recipients next week should be a great day for LaunchVic and where the government's got the entity to and what we're funding, but it shouldn't actually be the highlight. The highlight comes from those companies that will benefit from it. Not the companies that are the grant recipients, but the companies that will actually set up new incubators, new accelerator programs, new co-location, co-working spaces, which, by the way, actually works in beautifully with my small business portfolio too. And just to segue, about 4 months ago, I went out to Western Base, which is out in Melbourne. I don't know if anyone's been there or knows of it. It was built on the back of a near $14 million grant under the Gillard government, and it's operated by the Melton Shire. And it's got three components to it. It's got an incubator there with the local TAFE. It's got a co-working space that's been set up for people with hot desks for 1 or 2 days a week. And then it's got businesses there that are expanding that want slightly larger premises for 6 months to 12 months. And so there were people that were going all the way from Point Cook to Melton to participate in this. And when I think back to my time before Parliament, I ran my own business for 2.5 years. And when I set up the business, my wife was on maternity leave with our third child, so there was no income coming in from there. We had a massive mortgage, which we still have, and obviously I decided to leave work and start a business from scratch with no income, because that's of course what you do when you've got 5 mouths to feed and no money coming in. And we made a very, I say we because Deborah and I made these decisions collectively, but we made a very clear decision not to spend money on leasing premises. Now, the flip side of that was that we saved about $20,000 to $25,000 a year in setting up the business, which was great. The downside, of course, and most people have probably experienced this, is that I would get a knock on the door when I was working, and Deborah would say, I just need to go to the supermarket to get something. Benjamin's, who was my youngest, just born at the time, he's gone to sleep, so I don't expect him to wake up, but I just need you to know in case he does. Awesome. And of course, as soon as that door closed, you better believe it that Benjamin woke up. So a co-location space, which back at that time was really not something that many people knew about here in Melbourne, would have been perfect for me. I would have loved it, because when I set up the business, the one thing I really yearned for was that interaction, and I missed that. And so co-location spaces will be a really valuable tool for our small business community as well. Not just the tech sector with the incubators and accelerators, but yeah, it's some exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I'm at Collective Campus. I think you stopped by there one time, and yeah, it's great to be. If you are working at home, definitely check out the co-working spaces. A number of them in the city is good.
Not just the city. I opened a new one called the Workery in Glenhuntly Road, Austinweek.
Cool.
And there's one in Paran. I've been to one in Footscray. Obviously, the site out at Melton that I was talking about. So they're popping up everywhere. And as a government, I want to encourage that because that is something that brings community together, but also gives opportunity for people that can then bounce ideas off other people, and that's where hopefully we can see businesses flourish because of that collaboration.
Agreed. So you've got the $60 million fund. Let me take a few questions here. What role should the government play, excuse me, to ensure that startups receive the right business advice? Marketing, for example, is where there is proliferation of bad advice. That's the most voted question.
All right. Well, let me answer that question, but let me actually tell you what LaunchVic isn't. We're not a co-investment fund, and we very deliberately stayed away from not being a co-investment fund because we also decided that whilst the VC market in Australia is somewhat immature in comparison to, say, the US, it's still there nonetheless. And so we didn't want to be picking winners of companies and what they were doing, but trying to support. So I just wanted to add that on. In relation to picking winners in relation to marketing companies, I'm not going to be able to be of much help to you. So what we can do is we have a range of programs that we run for the small business community that startups will invariably be able to access because of the nature. So just on that point, important, I always also make this point when I talk publicly about the two. A startup will often start as a small business, but they are very different beasts because a small business doesn't necessarily want to be a startup, nor does a startup necessarily want to stay as a small business. And so we run programs for our small business community right throughout Victoria where we have mentors that go out and assist them both before they establish the business, during the establishment of the business, and then obviously post. We also have other programs. We have 2 small business buses that drive right around Victoria, metropolitan Melbourne and out of suburban that also can help provide some of that advice. And in fact, I was up in, where was I? I was up in Benalla about 4 weeks ago and we were launching the Northeast Small Business Festival. And unbeknownst to me, I asked the young lady whose business we were at launching it at a cafe. She was 19, and I asked her to come to the microphone. I said to her, how did you get information about how you started your business? And she said, oh, the small business bus. And I swear to God, that was not a setup. I did not know. I was expecting her to say, I asked mum, or asked dad, or asked a friend, or I got some help from a local accountant. That's what I was expecting. But it was great because what it meant was that not only did it validate the programs that we run as a government, but there was a real life proof that the programs actually work. So the reason I mention that is because those programs are still available to
How do people find it?
through the VicGov websites. And if you enter Small Business Mentor Service, you'll be able to access that information as well. But there are a whole range of things that we're looking to do. I don't want to give too much away because some of this will be in the announceables in terms of grants.
Go ahead. Just give us a sneak peek.
Well, it wouldn't be too far to say that I'd love to see that kind of mentoring service made available specifically to entrepreneurs. I've found, at least in Melbourne, that entrepreneurs are very, very generous with their information and advice about what they've experienced, what you can try and avoid as well. So that goes back to that question. And I'd like to see us sort of, formalise and put some structure in that so that people don't have to use Uncle Google to try and find the right advice, that we can actually try and link people up, both in terms of industry and sector of what they're doing or what they're trying to do, and also the stage that they're at.
From all your travels to Silicon Valley, Singapore, what are some of the things that you think would be nice for Victoria to adopt?
Well, there's a little bit in that for what I'm doing with the feds at the moment. So I've already met with Greg Hunt, who I think has the potential to be a very good federal innovation minister. He may not look like Doogie Howser or Wyatt Roy. He may not talk like Wyatt Roy, but he gets the policy. And so one of the things I spoke to him about is that we've got a lot of companies in Melbourne that are struggling with software engineers or the right type of people. And so, this will be odd and somewhat slightly controversial for a Labor Member of Parliament to say, but we need to look at the issue of 457 visas within the sector and the industry. We need to make it easier for people to access talent. For mine, I'm not nervous about that because the knowledge transfer that we get locally is huge. And also there's the opportunity that people that are great that come here want to stay here. So, I think that, build it and they will come. The other thing also is that the one thing I also mentioned was talking about VCs. When I was in San Fran, I think it was roughly September last year was my first trip. And I've been to San Fran before personally, which is great. It's a great city. They told me, the VCs were telling me that they have billions upon billions of dollars sitting offshore at the moment that they can't repatriate into the US because of US capital gains treatment. And so one of the things I said to Greg was that if there was a way that we could change the rules about setting up new VC funds here in Australia above a certain limit or dollar value, 200 million, 300, it doesn't matter what the figure is, but that if there was capital gains tax treatment changes for us here, if they brought that money here, then that would help more than anything turbocharge the industry. Because if you bring that kind of money,
bring the money here.
Because if you can bring that money here, then they don't want it sitting in a bank account at 2%. They want to do something with it. And the other thing also that again, Australian entrepreneurs replicate, so it's not a US, it's just a size and scale issue, is the very nature of successful entrepreneurs is when they get their big win, that might be the 50th time that they've tried to do something and the last 49 didn't work. They don't take their money and sit on a beach sipping pina coladas. They reinvest the money back into new startups. So that's why it's so important to really build that ecosystem, get the money here, get the people here, and then it will continue to evolve.
What about, a lot of startups here, we're kind of a bit obsessed with the US and Silicon Valley and Slack and all the software that we use, Google, Facebook. What opportunities do you see for Australian startups trying to tackle Asia?
Yeah, well, immense. If you look at what the federal government's done with their landing pads, I think it's a great initiative. I'm still not sure whether it will be successful, but the idea of them taking space in Brace, which is the startup location in Singapore, for them getting some space in Shanghai as well, I think has some merit to it. But again, we need to make sure it's targeted. And so we need to, what would be the purpose of a startup going to Singapore? I would assume that it will most likely be a fintech company. But there are other opportunities, and by no means am I limiting it to that, by the way. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is targeted and appropriate, both for the market that the companies are going to. But it may also be about something else. So they may be wanting to go into a market like Shanghai to look at a partner, and that's okay too. But if I come back to what we're doing, from a Victorian perspective, we have, and I come back to those trade and investment offices. We have 5 offices across Greater China. We have offices in Hong Kong, Beijing, Nanjing, Shanghai and Chengdu. And so for companies that are wanting to go overseas that need assistance, you can absolutely access our trade and investment offices, and that's what they're there to do, to assist. Now, yes, they largely assist bigger companies that are looking for trade opportunities or investment opportunities into Victoria, but that's not a reason for us not to be able to have a look at what you need, and if we can help, we will.
I'll jump on the question here. How did startups get things out of Innovation Nation? Seems like lip service. How do we take advantage of it?
Well, I mean, Innovation Nation's really a fluid concept, isn't it? It's about trying to change people's thinking. It's trying to change communities' attitudes. So, for example, the biggest thing that we can do in terms of Innovation Nation is get rid of the tall poppy syndrome, which I hate, and that's what differentiates the United States from Australia. More than anything else, it's the tall poppy syndrome. In the United States, they recognise that success is hard. They recognise that you're not going to get there the first time. So they encourage you that when you get there, to take a bow, pat yourself on the back and celebrate it. You should. And so, Innovation Nation is really, for me, about making sure that we encourage the community to change their attitudes. Right? Failing itself is not a bad thing. No one likes failure. We shouldn't be fearful of it. It's only detrimental if you don't learn the lessons from it. Right? If you continue to repeat the same mistakes, that's the definition of stupidity. Right? So, you only have to look at, you mentioned Slack. I love the idea about Slack. Is everyone aware about how Slack came about as a company? Right? Okay, so only a couple hands. So I'm going to tell you. So the 4 co-founders of Slack were game developers, and they were all located in different parts of either North America or across the globe. And so they developed Slack as a way of communicating where they were in the game development that they were developing. And halfway through the game development, they realised that Slack was the better commercial offering than the game that they were developing themselves. Right? That's innovation. That's people actually looking at something and realising that they might have something else. And that's no different, by the way, to the bio or the medtech or the pharma industries, where they can sometimes spend tens of millions of dollars developing a drug for one thing, and then realising that the application for that drug has another application altogether. So again, it's a mindset. So, I think Innovation Nation, as I said, it's not something that we should be trying to get to as a destination. It's not a train ride where we're trying to get off it. It's actually something that we need to continually talk about in terms of changing community views and norms.
How do startups get... what role do you think large corporations, this is a great question, have in helping startups? It seems, I mentioned Collective Campus and the lean startup courses they're doing. And, all the time we're hearing corporates try, how can we work with startups? You're dealing with both sides of the party here. How can it work? How do we team the two up?
Well, let me talk a little bit about fintech. I want to firstly give NAB a pat on the back for NAB Ventures and what they've done in the Docklands in terms of their community space. I think it's a tremendous benefit. But one of the things that I've seen differentiate what our banks have done, and of course we've only really got the 4 big ones, of course, no disrespect to the credit unions or the smaller banks like BOQ or Bendigo and Adelaide. What differentiates them from the US that I've seen personally is that their willingness to embrace fintech startups, not be fearful of the technology and the potential impacts it will have, but rather look at how they can then utilise that technology within their own business models. Now, the reason why I say I differentiate with the US is because when I've looked at the US, Citibank, Chase, JP Morgan, nearly all of the US banks that I've been watching are buying fintechs out of New York at the moment to sit on their technology. They're not actually buying them to incorporate or build the technology into their platforms, but really trying to be a blocker to their revenue streams. It won't work because firstly, they might be buying the wrong company. Secondly, for every company that they buy, there are probably 5 or 6 that are dealing in exactly the same technology in a slightly different way. And it's a race to it's a zero-sum game. It's a race to the bottom. And so I think that if I look at the banking sectors here, the CBA is probably a little bit slower than the others, but being the incumbent and being a little bit more conservative, that's not too much of a surprise. But I'm seeing them starting as large corporates to really embrace what startups can bring to the table. And, you know, just the other day, I was launching the new fit-out space for Moolah, which will not be lost for most people in this room. And, you know, they're fitting a space that the banks don't want to go because of their lending requirements and their treatment. But that's a company that's lending money, unsecured money, to small businesses right now around the country, located here out of Melbourne, because they think their algorithm is better than most and that they've got a high percentage of return on investment. Well, that's fantastic. But the banks will respond to that type of lending if they've got other opportunities, which is why you're seeing them investing there at the moment. So that's just one sector. I'm seeing it in a whole range of other corporates, but certainly I actually think our banking sector is leading the way in their support of the ecosystem.
So you see a couple of big corporates putting their stake in the ground and saying we're doing an accelerator. Seems like the first step, or I guess, you know, Mondelez, the guys from Cadbury, and Simplot, accelerator.
Well, Simplot have done amazing things in North America, by the way. They're a little bit behind here in Australia, and I hope to have the Australian subsidiary come to speed pretty quick on that. But they've done awesome stuff in North America.
So do you think accelerator is a good starting point, or is it hiring startups? Like, I had a good conversation with the NAB maybe even a year ago now, and what I liked their philosophy was about we don't have to give all these guys money, but we've got a number of customers for them. Right?
Yep.
And that's more important than money, is if I can team them up. Is there a way that corporates can be better leveraging product development from startups? Is there a way the government can help that?
Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with the LaunchVic fund in terms of incubators, accelerators, and co-location spaces. So, you know, if we can get that model right, and if we can expand it into different areas than that to which it's already operating, then that's how we do exactly what you're asking. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's actually a philosophy, and you can't just do it because it's trendy, right? If the management team of a corporate are not actually invested for the right reasons in terms of why they're doing something and the reasons for doing it, not just the why, then it will fail. Because when things get tough, when they've been investing in putting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars behind an accelerator program, they take a percentage stake in all the companies that come through, and after 2 years, not one company's made it, then the CEOs at the top that are I guess, responding to analyst pressure and their performance will, at that stage, look to change what they're doing. So from my perspective, it's a mindset, and that's what's been great about seeing that. I mean, the one you did mention was Telstra. Telstra, of course, for all of their woes, being sort of the number one incumbent, with their Murrurudu facility, have done an amazing job that's been very successful. And so I think we also need to be prepared to support the corporates that do that, not just call them out when we think that they're doing the wrong thing by the little guy.
Right, yeah. I think it was almost sometimes just the trendy thing to do, but you're right. All right, we'll take one last question here. Can you summarise how the government is helping innovative entrepreneurs with their startup businesses? Do you want to wrap it up?
I kind of like to think that I've already answered that, to be honest.
Second one's the new one.
Second one is the new one. Do you think this subsidy for international startups coming to Australia, i.e. Slack, Zendesk, can make it harder for local and smaller companies to find talent? Interesting. Yeah.
Chicken and egg. So part of building an ecosystem means we need to have talent. Being able to support our local companies develop means they need to access talent. So bringing companies like Zendesk and Slack and Square here into the ecosystem in Victoria means that if there is greater talent coming to work for those companies, then there's greater talent for other companies to try and poach them. So I've publicly said to a couple of companies that I've launched their new headquarters for in Melbourne that I've said, look, I'm not going to apologise for the pressure that this will put on your wages and salary bill in the short term, because it will put pressure on salary and wages. I'm not going to pretend it won't. But what it will do is grow the size and scale at the moment that's building that ecosystem. So at the moment, Victoria leads the country in ICT grads. We're at about 36%, New South Wales is about 28%, and Queensland's about 18%. So we need to have somewhere for those people to go. We need to have a pipeline, and we need to increase that pipeline because, by the way, as impressive as those stats might sound, over the last 10 years there's been a decline in ICT grads coming out of university. So we need to reverse that drain, and the only way you can reverse that is by creating opportunities and then having that demand met with supply. Whether that supply is homegrown talent out of the university sector or whether it's by bringing in people from outside, and that doesn't necessarily mean, by the way, overseas. That can be also from outside of Victoria. But that, again, bottom line, better talent here, more people looking for their employees here, more likely to set up here, build more people, more jobs, and it keeps happening. So that's the premise behind what we're doing, and that's why we're doing it. And yes, there will be consequences in the short term, but far greater positive consequences in the long term.
Well, I think there's also big opportunities for Australian startups to partner with Slack and stuff. Like Slack has add-on partners and Zendesk has other add-on partners. So it's a way to, like, I'm working with Slack, I'm working with Zendesk, helps you get other...
Yeah, so let me just talk about Zendesk for a moment. Is Brett Adam here, by the way? So Brett Adams, the Managing Director of Zendesk here in Australia or the Asia Pacific region.
One of our partners?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great partner. And really interesting, two things about that. One, they first put some people into Melbourne around circa 2011-12 because they found that in Victoria in particular, by the way, that there was huge organic growth in people using their software that they'd never sold to or actually set up a chain to sell into. So when it came to them looking where would they place their headquarters, it wasn't New South Wales or Sydney that we were competing with, it was the Philippines and Singapore. And two things happened. One, the growth out of Victoria continued at pace, which has, by the way, been the experience of Slack and some of the other companies as well, which is, again, a tribute to everybody, not just in this room, but within the broader ecosystem. But the other thing was that when we did the deal to bring Zendesk to Melbourne, part of it was to have 175 software engineering jobs created here in Melbourne. Well, let me tell you that in the first 12 months, Zendesk have created 100 software engineering jobs straight away. And let me also tell you that every one of those jobs are Australian. Not one has been imported from overseas. Now, that's because of the model that Brett has tried to pursue, where he wants to invest in younger talent, nurture it, and have it grow into the Zendesk culture. But nonetheless, I think that's pretty impressive both ways. One, that their growth rate has been so significant that they've been able to achieve something that they were committing to in 3 years, almost complete 50%, over 50% in year one, and two, be able to recruit homegrown talent as well.
Brilliant. I want everyone back on their feet. We're going to thank the minister for coming tonight. Come on.
Oh.